breakfast, I went straight to the exhibition centre. First, a word about the whole expo. The expo is a 2-day exhibition of all things related to mixed martial arts. It's hosted by the UFC, and so they bring a lot of people along for autograph signings, and they put on special demonstrations or things like that. Considering it was their first in the UK, and considering the price was only £33 for attendance on both days, it was extremely good. Okay, that's the first thing I want to make absolutely clear. It was very, very good value for money for what it was, and I think they did very well with what they sort of planned to do. There are improvements that I would like to suggest. These are improvements first that wouldn't have sprung to mind straight away, but in light of how well they have done, when they return to London and they want to do another expo, there is a lot they should consider in doing. Now, Earls Court Exhibition Centre is the perfect place in London for this, despite not being too close to the Dome. It was absolutely perfect. They used about a third of the side, a third of the main hall's size for their exhibition. Because they probably didn't know how many people would turn up, that was probably a very sensible thing to do. In actual fact, I think they could possibly cover the whole thing. They had a central corridor which they used, and then there's sort of like a wing to the east and a wing to the west of this hall that go out. Now those two bits weren't used. They were cordoned off by very large curtains. I think on the east they only used a little bit for private demonstrations on with people like Randy Couture and stuff like that, for people who actually wanted to train. They called it training and development, and they did like little 1-hour sessions of, you know, how to do X, Y and Z. Those were, of course, 4 trainee fighters who came ready to actually, you know, have an exercise session. And on the other side, they used a tiny little bit of it for the VIP lounge, which is, I suppose, I didn't go in, obviously not being part of the fight club, I can only suppose, but I think it was where the fighters that were there for that day could hide out to avoid being mobbed by people out actually on the floor itself, the exhibition floor itself. And of course it was a place where people who had paid that little bit more, they were, you know, fight club members, could get to see people without having to stand for hours in queues and stuff like that. I don't know how much they paid, so I don't know whether that was good value for money for them. I know that the prices you had to pay for, you know, one of the sort of exercise, the training and development sessions, were about £60, which is pretty steep. But then you were getting to train with, you know, legends in the sport. So, all things considered, it was probably good value for money. I can't really say because I don't train, so I have no idea about that. Now, the main hall, there was the problem of space. You know, the stands were mostly clothing stands, with some completely unrelated stands. Paintball was there, for some reason, don't ask me why. But most of it was clothing stands or online DVD sellers and stuff like that. That was fabulous. That was fabulous for that particular expo. But what they want to do really is start to encourage stalls and stands from the local MMA fight clubs. You know, there's something called the London Shoot Fighters. They really could have done with having a stall there. just to sort of showcase their gym and what they are about as well. If they expanded to include the wings on the sides, as well as just the main corridor, then they would have plenty of room to do this. So they really want to branch out with who they're inviting in. I don't know whether they invited lots of people and lots of people just didn't turn up. I suspect, probably not, I suspect the problem may have something to do with having stands there for fighters and indeed camps that have nothing to do with the UFC. I think they need to be bigger than their brand on this one. I think they need to incorporate fight clubs, and they need to incorporate people, even if they don't supply anybody to the UFC. The reason is, first, they can use that as a bridge building experience themselves. Secondly, it enhances their UFC expo. It actually makes it better for the fans who aren't just wandering around a set of shops that are selling clothes. That's the danger if they repeat the expo as it is without sort of enlarging it. You know, it's just going to be about buying clothes. Now, the freebies were fantastic. Everybody got a bag from myprotein.com on the way in. Obviously, you had to go in. You went through the foyer and into the sort of the first part of the hall itself, which was set up as there were two lines. The first one was for getting your tickets, and that was good because they had about 20 staff actually, and each desk was different. So if you wanted to buy online, if you wanted to buy tickets on the day, you knew where to go. If you wanted to, if you were there with an email ticket that had a barcode that needed to be scanned, you went over there. Big signage up at the top. It was fantastic. Once you'd done that, you were given your pass, one of these, and you were given a stamp on your hand, an ink stamp, and then you had to queue up at the main entrance itself. The first day, you know, numbers were significantly high. But the second day, you had twice as many people there. Now, there's two other things that I want to talk about in relation to this. The first one is the fact that there was a lot of queuing involved. And the queues for a single autograph, depending on who you wanted to go to, could be quite lengthy. It's impossible for everybody to get around the whole thing. The reason was each queue was about an hour in length if you got there pretty quickly, and there were 6 tables with 2 fighters on each table. The first thing that the UFC got kind of wrong was who went with who. You know, they had some pretty huge names like Wanderlei Silva and Rich Franklin there, and they had some people who were less well known and possibly less popular. And what they want to do is mix them up. So you put a very strong person with somebody who is less well known, just so that you don't have the case where you had on the first day of Paul Kelly and Stefan Struve turning up to what was quite a miserable length queue compared to, you know, next door where Frankie Edgar and Marcus Davis were sitting, and the queue was sort of out the door.